Passover to be observed? 1 week, 7 days. Had the 7 days, the days of unleavened bread, that they were supposed to only eat unleavened bread, and then, of course, the Passover. But what happened right on the heels of Passover? What was the next feast? The Feast of Weeks. Okay, the Feast of Weeks, where they counted out 7 Sabbaths, 49 days, 50 days. And we understand, possibly, we get maybe a little insight in Acts chapter 2, that those that were present in Jerusalem for Passover, under which point Jesus was crucified, maybe had prolonged in there because, again, Jerusalem to Nazareth is how far? Did you guys look that up in distance? Give an approximation. It's about 65, 70 miles. Okay? What did they have to get in? Did they get in their SUV and drive up, the King's Highway and get there in a few hours? No. No, and again, we're talking about, as we look in the story, that there is a caravan. So they would come together as family or groups down, and they weren't traveling at any great speed. And I actually Googled on Google Maps what it would take to walk from Jerusalem to Nazareth now, and it said approximately 30 hours of walking if you were to walk it today. And of course, walking by yourself, you could probably maintain a pretty good clip. But even if you just walked 8 hours a day, you're talking 3+ days in order to get from one point to the other. So we don't have this great, transit system where they can just, pick up and go, be back by evening. And so my point being, of course, if during the Passover, people would come in those kinds of distances, they would probably make arrangements and with family to stay. Because the next festival, the Feast of Weeks, they would want to be a part of. And then they would wait until after Pentecost in which to then return home. Again, we don't know from the text if that's what it was, but we do know at least it was the 7 days for the Passover in which they stay there, and then Mary and Joseph, then with the rest of the caravan, turn to go back home. But of course, who did they leave behind? Jesus. And they get about, how far away? A day away. So they're probably getting ready to camp down for dinner, and they say, hey, well, where's Jesus? Wasn't he with the cousins and the uncles? Can't find him. Oh, he's not here. So they got to go a day's journey back. So now we're 2 days, and they spend how many days in Jerusalem looking? 3 days. So now we're potentially, maybe, 5 days where Jesus has been separated from Mary and Joseph, in which he has been where? In the temple. Doing what? Okay? Teaching and learning, observing, questioning, answering questions. Which, of course, is I know my perception of that type of Jewish culture is based in what I've seen in of movies, of this constant, bickering and fighting and talking about laws and what this law meant, what this rabbi said, and what this, rabbi said about this prophet. And it was just, trying to get all of these, things just being cerebral, we might say. Of course, I don't think that is any way, shape, or form the case of our Lord. He is with the teachers in Israel. He is at the temple in Israel, in Jerusalem, and he is engaging in this discourse with these educated, learned men. And how did they respond? Or what was their impression of this child? Amazed at maybe not only his answers, because they were obviously asking him answers, but his questions. And again, just something that Luke brings out that speaks to the true unique character that is in Jesus, the Nazarene, and what it is that he represents, and lays, again, a foundation of which Luke can go back. Theophilus can go back and do his own investigation and do his own investigative work to validate what it is that Luke has been presenting to him through these stories. And so, the question in the class book in number 7 asks, how frantic would you, as a parent, of course, I'm only going to ask this of parents. If you're not a parent, you don't get to play. How frantic would you be after 3 days, let alone maybe 5, of not finding your child?
I was going to say, too, not only just the terror of potentially, losing your child, but just thinking about everything that they had been told about the child. It's like, this is supposed to be the Messiah, the king. We lost him like he was like a quarter or something. I mean, obviously, of course, back then. But I'm just thinking about how they must have thought how much of a goof up it must have been on their end. It's just like, how could we have done this with something so important?
Yeah, we're out of the tribe. We're off the island. We get booted. Again, that's the the human response, to that we would all probably no doubt feel about, hey, I've been given this great responsibility. We've blown it. Not realizing, again, who it is that they are referring to. You're talking about the Son of God. I think he's probably safe.
I'm sorry, Craig, I was also going to say with that I think that, again, to the point that I think you were about to bring out, what they were told and what this child was supposed to mean, I can't help but think that Jesus' response to them was kind of more like, hey, don't forget. When he says, I must be about my Father's business, don't forget why I'm here. This is more than just me hanging out with you guys and you filing me on your taxes.
Exactly.
It's much bigger than that, and please don't forget that. I can't help but think that was
Yeah.
the reason he said what he said.
Yeah, getting to
Coming from a 12-year-old.
yeah. Again, and getting to question 9 and about the reaction they would have. What action would you have if your 12-year-old answered you the way Jesus answered after being lost for 4 to 5 days? Mark, you had a comment you were going to...
Well, not in regard to that, but one of the things interesting is it keeps saying that as Jesus gets older, he grows in stature and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
He understands, at age 12, a Jewish boy would start learning and being schools about God.
Right.
So he's understanding. There's something that happens here that he knows who he is and what his, now he's going to have to, he knows that his ministry on earth, it just seems like he's involved, like Brandon says, he knows what he's there to do.
Exactly. And that where, we need to make sure we take ourselves out of the earthly perspective and put ourselves in the spiritual realm of which Jesus came to do what it is that he had to do. And yes, we as parents may have a different complete reaction because we're not dealing with the Messiah. We're dealing with flawed kids. And so, with regards, to the initial reaction of one of just, we don't have anything said except for what? They didn't understand. They didn't understand what it was that the statement that he had made to them. But, of course, then, as the last question asked is, how's the rest of Jesus' youth summarized? Verses 50 and 51. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and continued in subjection to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. Same thing that we said earlier that Steve talked about just a few verses earlier. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. To what Brandon talked about, that growth and that increasing, we understand what wisdom is, right? It's a pretty simple concept. Is stature is equally simple to understand? I'm sorry, just a second, Keith. Steve?
Well, it depends on what definition. One definition is he simply grew in age. He continued to grow
Mm-hmm.
year. The other is that he grew in height. In other words, he began to look like a man. He was no longer a child. So this wisdom with that kind of growth, that as we mature, as we grow, we're supposed to get a little smarter.
Mhm.
He was a lot more than just smart.
Keith?
Yeah, Steve's right. I mean, he drew, but it's how he handled
Mhm.
himself, how he handled.
One of the definitions,
Hard for us to comprehend how this young child, he is flesh,
Mhm.
how all encompassing this has to be, that he knows that there are greater responsibilities he has.
exactly. And one of the things that we can look at, if we look at this, even the modern day definition of stature, basically has two breakdown. One is, somebody is short of stature. Somebody is tall of stature. We'll point Rick up here. Point you too, short's tall. So we have, that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of stature is the importance or reputation gained by ability or achievement or accomplishment. And not that that is something that, of course, well, I guess if anyone can boast in it, can be Christ. But I think that leads more to what it is that Luke is referring to when we have this word that he uses as stature, is that he is building his reputation, his importance, okay? And that is all based on the wisdom and the knowledge that he demonstrates and that he excels at. And exactly, to Steve's point about there comes a point, when we mature, that is something that we should all, it should be evident, in other words, to all of us in that. And so, wanted to get into chapter 3 and to talk a little bit about John, but that's fine. We're still ahead of schedule as far as our verse count's concerned. So we'll pick up beginning chapter 3, Lord willing, when Mark returns on Wednesday.